One of the most notorious outlaws in the Tennessee Valley moved to Lauderdale County, Alabama in early 1863. He was known as Mountain Tom Clark because of coming from the mountain counties. This moniker helped to distinguish him from another man also named Tom Clark, living in the same Blackburn area that he moved into. Reportedly, Mountain Tom had left his home with his wife and small child to avoid being conscripted into the Confederate Army. The conscript officers found him in his new home and took him into the Confederate Army. He soon deserted the Confederate Army and fled to Clifton, Tennessee to enlist in the Union Army. Later, after running afoul of Army discipline, he deserted that army as well. He bribed a guard with a gold watch to turn a blind eye on his watch so he could escape. It was then that he joined in with a group of men who had also deserted both armies and were then engaged in robbing, raping, and murdering in and around Lauderdale County. These gangs were called the Bugger Gang. Shown here is a book entitled The Bugger Saga, written by author Wade Pruitt, that was destroyed in a fire, and he attempted to rewrite from memory with this current cover. Mountain Tom was credited with many crimes in the surrounding area. Some of the crimes were the Wilson Plantation murder, the torture and robbing of several Florence citizens, and more. According to Dr. Wade Pruitt, author of the only book about the Buggers, Tom Clark was one of 20 buggers who conducted the raid on the Wilson Plantation. They conducted a second raid into Florence in the September of 1872, the criminal escapade that was to become Mountain Tom's downfall. The Lauderdale Times Extra of September 5th, 1872, reported that after several houses were robbed in Florence, 2 men were spotted driving a sorrel mare hitched to a buggy at 2 o'clock in the morning. At sunrise, a posse led by Florence City Marshal William Edward Blair left in pursuit of the outlaws. According to the Times, the posse caught up to the gang near Gravelly Springs. The elegantly dressed outlaws, who had stopped for dinner and were in the process of unhitching their horses, were caught by surprise and put up no resistance to Marshal Blair and his men. Seeing that they were both caught and outnumbered, the outlaws surrendered their arms and were promptly placed under arrest and taken back to Florence, where they were jailed. Sheriff Calvin Hudson, fearing the county jail insecure, deputized 8 men to stand guard with the jailer. About midnight, a great crowd arrived at the jail demanding the keys. Refusing to hand over the keys, the jailer fired into the crowd. Reportedly, fire was returned, and the angry mob soon broke open the doors to the cells and disarmed the jailer. They dragged Clark and his 2 accomplices to a vacant lot across Pine Street, behind the old Masonic Lodge, and lynched the 3 criminals, hanging them from a large tree in the lot. The next morning, the bodies were found by a group of citizens who identified Clark. Mayor Neander H. Rice ordered the bodies buried in one of the old fields near our town. But a legend begun perhaps in the 1930s or as late as the 1960s has it that one of the men on the burial detail remembered hearing Clark boast that no one ever run over Tom Clark. He got the idea to bury the outlaw outside the cemetery underneath East Tennessee Street so that everyone would run over Tom Clark. This burial legend is not supported by any of the newspaper reports of the time, nor is it mentioned in subsequent accounts of the lynching. Still, a historic marker in Florence tells the story of Mountain Tom's notorious career as an outlaw, his hanging, and his ignominious burial under Tennessee Street. The true location of the outlaw's final resting place is a mystery, but his legend remains to tell a tale of turbulent times in post-Civil War Alabama.